good. There we go. Okay, so this way Simpliaxis can have a transcript of it as well. Oh, and one thing I always forget to say. So if you are attending this session, then Simpliaxis will give you a 10% discount on any classes that that you take with them. And here is a discount code. I put it in the chat, so you can use that if and when you choose to take any classes with the company. Right. Okay, so with that said, like I said, open floor, no fixed agenda. I'm happy to stay as long as there are questions. If there are no questions, we can kind of just end the call at some point. So what's up? Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, guys, probably I will start with my questions. Probably you can recognize me.
Yeah, I do.
From, from the past CSPO class. So after the certification, we formed the Agile team in our organization. Everything was going smooth and nice. The one place or a couple of places I'm struggling is when the sprint is over. Conducting a successful sprint retro is kind of a little challenging for me. And second thing, I'm trying to find a way to reward my team. Like, we close 7 cards or 8 cards or 2 cards. There should be a reward culture in our team. So that's what I'm trying to develop right now. So my question is, how to conduct a successful retro session with the team members, right? Talking about what went well, what went wrong, how can we improve? I don't feel like I'm getting that traction in the team right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a tough one because retrospectives do tend to get boring after a while if you don't keep changing up the format or keep it actionable, because people kind of go in there kicking and screaming like, what's really going to change? Why are we doing this stuff? If you think about it, retrospective is nothing more than a self-auditing mechanism. And so if you have a conscious way of thinking through what choices you made every day, the next day will get progressively better if you're being, intentional about it. Retrospective is no different than that. Even if it's a 15-minute conversation, if you can look at some basic data, like let's say you committed to 15 things this sprint and you only finished 11 of those, 4 things didn't get done, it warrants a deeper conversation as to why. So maybe those 4 things didn't get done because you had a late realization about something else, and then you had to swap some requirements in. And so because of that, the sprint essentially failed, right? Because you didn't finish everything that you said you would do. Now, that doesn't mean you didn't work hard. You worked hard, but you had some late realization, or maybe you had scope creep, or maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding about a requirement, or maybe you overestimated something or underestimated something. So there's always something to talk about in every sprint. It's really about what is the need of the hour. And so if it's a new team that's brand new to this process, then I would say focus on table stakes. So table stakes could be things like commitment versus completion, right? How is our commitment versus completion ratio going? And maybe you set a benchmark as a team that, you know what, we're going to aim for 80% or more commitment versus completion ratio. Anytime we fall below that, that's not acceptable. We get above 80%, okay, 8 out of 10 things got done, that's not bad, right? So we'll try and maintain a consistent velocity of getting 8 things done, even if we commit to 10 things. At least that gives us some initial confidence that, yeah, you know what, for the most part, we are a trustworthy team. So if an executive is sitting like 5-6 hops away from you and they ask, hey, will this stuff get done 3 months from now? The only way for them to be confident about what your delivery maturity is for you to consistently deliver in short increments. So if you can deliver in short increments, then you can look at the track record and say, yeah, boss, we can deliver 15 things every sprint. And so then they would just kind of replicate and say, well, if you can do 15 in one sprint, you can do 45 in 3, assuming that you have the same nature of work that's going to be in the future, assuming you have the same capacity and a few assumptions logically along the way. So looking at some basic metrics like commitment versus completion, or even if you look at commitment versus completion, what happens is, depending on which tool you're using, if you're using Jira, version 1, Rally, Azure DevOps, like all of those tools, essentially it's like a fancy version of Microsoft Excel, right? It's just a backlog management tool, right? So depending on which tool you're using, people get very creative at gaming systems, right? This is with all of us. It's human nature at scale. And so what happens is when you're looking at your commitment versus completion, people will either undercommit because they feel like if I can just commit to 5 things and get 5 things done, even if I do 10 things over that, it doesn't really show up. So we're not tracking that stuff anyway. So on paper, my commitment versus completion at a lower number will look 100%. I said I'd do 5 things, I finished 5 things. But they really have a capacity of doing, say, 10 things, right? So because there's a lot of fear in the system. So people would rather undercommit and overdeliver. That's where the psychology that undercommit, overdeliver comes from. And so making sure that the team manager overemphasizes that psych safety is important. So people feel confident that they can be honest about the estimation. right? That would automatically lend itself well to a basic conversation around estimation. How do you estimate? Whatever numbering or alphabetical system you're using, whether it's points or it's t-shirt sizes or whatever the thing is that you use to estimate, it doesn't really matter as long as the vocabulary is consistent. So as long as you can anchor on some sort of a lowest common denominator, and then you can estimate off of that, everybody is relatively estimating similarly, right? So that's some sort of mechanics of estimation. That's a retro topic again in itself, right? And so table stakes would be things like basic estimation, basic planning maturity from commitment versus completion standpoint. And then to avoid people to trick the system and undercommit or overcommit, right? You can think about your commitment versus completion as a function of your velocity. So it's a bit of a nuanced concept. So give me like 30 seconds to unpack it. Think through this. If, let's say you said you would do 10 things, but you finished all the 10 things. That's great. That means your forecasting ability is 100%. You said you would do 10, you finished 10, right? And the velocity is 10 at that point because you finished 10 things. Now, on the other side of that, let's say you said you would do 10 things and you finished 5 things. Now your velocity is 5, but your forecasting ability is 50%. That means only half the time you're accurate with your planning, right? On the other side of the same thing, if you said you would do 10 things, but you finished 20 things, now your velocity is 20 and your forecasting ability is 200%, right? Now, again, 50% or 200% is not sustainable. Ideally, you want to get to 100%. Is that always going to happen? No, that's why it's called ideal case. So the question is, how much can you get to? Can you get to 80%? Can you get to 90%? Can you get to 75%? What's an acceptable tolerance limit, right? Now, once you get to that and you say, you know what, 8 out of 10 things is acceptable for us. So now what you're giving yourself is that wiggle room of those two things, which essentially becomes unplanned work, right? Unplanned work needs to be further bifurcated into truly unplanned or unplannable. If it's unplanned, you can fix that through refinement, through definition of ready, through preempting a lot of the conversation before you get into planning. Because unplanned work just means you didn't do your due diligence in some form or shape. You could have talked about this either in a refinement meeting or grooming, as they say, of the backlog, or you could have tightened up your definition of ready, or maybe you could have talked with the team that is, that owes you some information because it's an upstream or downstream team. Whatever the thing was, there was some forum somewhere that is a disconnect. That's unplanned work, right? Unplanned essentially is late realization. Unplannable is no matter what I do, there is no way I would know what to do here, like a support work, if you will, right? So if it's unplannable work, then you need to have some space to be able to deal with that. And you need to be able to have some space to deal with that without upsetting your executives around the idea or the expectation of planned deliverables. So Scrum or Kanban or any Agile practice at the end of the day is going to give you some sort of a framework so that you can get better at being able to assess the capacity to deliver on planned work. Whatever is unplanned, you want to get better at that by planning better. Whatever is unplannable, you want to create enough space that you can react to it. And how you react to it could change. Maybe you have a rotation policy and you say this sprint, Akash will take care of all the unplannable work. Or maybe there's some sort of a capacity split that 80% of our capacity is for planned work, 20% is for unplannable work. And we're always going to maintain some level of capacity. All of these conversations are extremely nuanced and require every team member to contribute and stay present. That's how over a period of time, you can build the muscle memory of being a high-performing outfit. What is a high-performing outfit at the end of the day? It is an outfit that can be trusted, that is predictable. So your predictability is nothing but your forecasting ability, commitment versus completion. You said you would do 10 things, finish 10 things. Don't do 25, don't do 15, don't do 5, do 10, right? Because what I'm trying to get better at is if I can assess the capacity to deliver on planned work, then what I can do is I can forsake some level of capacity from the present for the future, which is refinement, and I can start to carve out the line of sight for the future. And if I carve out the line of sight for the future deep enough, assuming that line of sight is similar to what I've done in the past, now I can do all sorts of magical stuff with it, which means I can do financial projections, I can do estimate projections, I can lay out roadmaps, because let's say you have 100 things in your backlog and you're consistently delivering 10 things. After about 3 or 4 windows, it's a simple accounting exercise. You've got 70 things, 7 more sprints. Each sprint costs you $10,000. You know exactly how much money it's going to cost you. But all of that is predicated on the assumption of how confident you are with the line of sight into the future. This is why, if you think about it, traditionally speaking, in the waterfall days, as they say, or in the traditional project management days, why did the Microsoft project plan have those 57 lines in it where everything was documented to the T? It was because they could see into the future. Everything was static. And that's when they said it's 57 things, we can fund it for $500,000. But now you have a backlog, right? So it's a backlog which is evolving. So obviously you can't fund that backlog because it's a point in time realization. And so now your obsession should be to convert that into a static list. But that's a pursuit. It won't ever be a static list. What you can do is get some sort of a rhythm, the rhythm of chunking up work in 10 things or 20 things or 25 things. Then what you can go back to your product folks or your executives with this, hey boss, 25 things with this level of complexity, with this volume of work can be done in this much amount of time and costs us this much amount of money. Now you put the burden on the product ownership folks or on the leaders to say, hey, whenever you give us work, carve it up into these 25 types of things so that we can immediately respond with an estimate. Yeah, you know what? It's about 5 days. It's about 15 days, 25 days. But all of that is just helping you get a better understanding of the nature of your work. This you want to talk about as one of the many topics in your retrospective, right? That's just the work. Now think about having people in 5 different time zones. Think about the asynchronous communication through Slack, through Microsoft Teams, Confluence. Think about synchronous communication happening where for somebody the sun is up, for somebody the sun is down. How much rigor you need to put into that so you can show up prepared, so the inputs for the meeting are clear, so you can start on time, you can end on time, the dynamics of all of that. That's now all the people element of it, right? That can also be a discussion point in retrospective. So these are table stakes that you can talk about with new teams. As teams get seasoned, the discussion becomes more nuanced because then now you're going after precision. So the same metrics, now you start to challenge them more. So you say that 80% is not going to cut now for commitment completion. We want to be at 95%. We want to be at 100%. What does it take for us to do that? You can focus on engineering practices if you're a tech shop, right? I'm an engineer by profession. And so I would talk about CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, branching strategies, microservices. Does it have to be a monolith of an application? Can we break it down? You can talk about all sorts of things, right? So sky's your limit at that point. If it's a non-tech company and it's like a marketing company, you talk about campaign writing, the content of the campaigns, the frequency of how you cut it down. So it really depends on what the nature of the work is. But essentially, retrospective is just a self-auditing mechanism, right? A self-auditing mechanism that allows you to look back on everything that happened in the sprint, get better as a team. There are some really good resources out there. So I may have given this in the class as well, but people who are not with me in the previous class here, here are a few websites. I'm going to put in the chat window. There we go. So a lot of these websites are freely available and you can look at them for templates. These templates are customizable. You can port these templates into whatever natural ecosystem you have of tools. And that helps you with the framing of a conversation. And the templates are not going to give you any magic, but it gives you different ways of looking at data. And so it keeps the conversation fresh, right? Because you're looking at the same thing slightly differently. Oh, it's a cute cat, Michael. Sorry, you have a hand up, Michael. Go ahead. Your audio is not coming through for some reason, Michael. You're on mute again.
I'm on mute again. No, this is one of my rescues. This is one of my latest rescues. His name's Charlie. He's just really attention hungry right now. Anyways, look, I'm sorry because you're gonna look at the dog, not at me. Number one thing, sir, I've not had the privilege of learning from you. I've spent 14 years in Agile. I've spent 12 years working in Scrum. There's 4 points that I'd like to make, but I want to make sure you stop me if you see something wrong or something we need to adjust. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go.
The first one is when you start a Scrum, you have an expectation that you're going to get clear objectives. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a fantasy. You never get clear objectives. Okay. But that is also the challenge where the closer and the more connected you can get to the C-level or the director or who you need to work with on what they want, that's going to help you align properly for that Scrum. The other part to this is I want you to rejoice the first time you're running a Scrum and all the wheels fall off. Every single one of them crashes and burns because that's where you start to build the real team. Okay. I'm terrified when I go into organizations and everything goes great for 3 months because I know it's coming. All right. It's going to come. And I don't want to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I know things are going to break at some point. And it's not a matter that they break. It's a matter of what you do after that that's important. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well said. And yeah, I couldn't have said any better. So you definitely need that executive push, and it has to be politically acceptable, where it's part of your company objectives and it's not just lip service. So yeah, absolutely, I 100% agree. And then yeah, you wanna celebrate those mistakes, because I believe that you want to be in the business of making unique mistakes, not the same mistake. So if it happened, great. You should celebrate that we found something new, and then you should also make a decision that this will never ever happen again. And so we should fix this if it's a problem, right? And you go after the root cause, and that's what a Scrum Master is supposed to do, right? You're supposed to resolve impediments. Now, you might not have the authority every time, but you have enough knowledge to expose the need for the right conversation in the right forum. And then what the people who have the authority choose to do is a true litmus test of the seriousness the organization has with the Agile agenda in general. But that's not your problem. Your problem is that they're looking at you, they might not know it yet. So show them the mirror either way. And then what they do when they look at the mirror is up to them.
Two more points, if I may, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
One is our goal as a Scrum Master, or even as a product owner, is to build the team. I've been in positions with companies where I've had the CEO and the president say, yeah, we weren't doing well and we would have fired you, but we know if we did, because we couldn't afford you, there would have been a mutiny. All right. Now, I don't look to create that, but I understand my focus is on that team. I want to understand what's happening above, but if I don't spend 90% of my time building the team to make sure that we're all on the same page, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. The last point I want to make, though, is velocity. I find this word to be toxic because there's so many, especially large corporations. I worked at a biomedical manufacturing company, and when I started, it was 300 people, and everybody was fighting. And when I left 13 years later, there were over 10,000 people worldwide. And they looked at velocity as a metric of productivity. Understand, and this is the biggest thing that I wish that we could all communicate, especially going up the chain of command, and that's velocity is a guess, and we don't guess well.
That's fair. Yeah, 100%. I think that, and that's why I like to use velocity in combination with something. So velocity in combination with your predictability measure, for example. Velocity in isolation, like you said, is a number that's made up. It's like the stock market. Today it's this, tomorrow it's that. The important thing is the consistency of that. Are you able to maintain a consistent flow? And do you have a standardized definition of that within the team? Outside the team, it might mean different things to different people. So it's just a number at the end of the day, or an alphabet. The meaning is attached to it by the team. That's fair. I agree, 100%. Gautam, does that help? And check out those that might help, with some templates and framing for the conversation.
Excellent answers, Akash. It gives me kind of a pathway where to go next, right? That's a really good answer. If somebody, I'm thinking I'm taking all the time, but I'll just shoot my one more question. For the Scrum Planning Session, what's happening right now? After taking your session, I started is in our team. Myself and the Scrum Master, we are doing the prioritization in the backlog, refining, and then it goes to the doing column on the Azure board. What's really happening in the planning session, that we are expecting the team members to say, I can do only this much, I can do only this much, but we are not saying it. If I put 30 cards, I'm okay with 30 cards. One card is fine. Again, I don't know why, what is happening afterwards, end of the sprint. If it has 20 cards, we will be able to finish only 5 to 6 cards. Remaining 14 cards is getting pushed to the next sprint, right? So I'm not putting any kind of restriction that you mentioned before, 80% work or 70% work. I think that's why it's getting sprint over sprint over sprint. Yeah, and that's a muscle memory that is extremely dangerous for a team. Once you start getting into the habit of postponing, the more you postpone it, the lesser the chances it will get done ever, because you just get into the habit of rolling things over and over again. It's like, saying, I'll skip the gym today, I'll go tomorrow, and then I'll go tomorrow, then I'll go tomorrow, and that tomorrow never comes, right? So there needs to be, at least in my experience, there needs to be really strong leadership in emphasizing that we are not just trying to maximize throughput, but we are trying to deliver quality work. We're trying to deliver valuable work at a sustainable pace. So if you took 25 or you took 30 things last time, but you only finished 5 things, then hey, guess what? Don't take 30 things the next time. Take 5 things the next time, right? It's no different than, at 4 o'clock in the evening, if you get a crash in energy every time,
It's probably because you're eating bad food throughout the day, so you're getting a crash. Hey, guess what? Next day, don't do that. Right? Eat something healthy, and then you won't get that crash. So it's the same thing. This is again self-auditing, right? So you want to think through what mistakes are we making, and you have a forum for that. You have the retrospective for that. So back in the day when I was an engineering manager, I would not attend a retrospective because I was a firm believer of creating a bit of a distance where the team can breathe and live by themselves, because that's where they have to truly flourish. But I would make sure that they did the retrospective. So if I heard that they're skipping the retrospective, I would say, why are you skipping the retrospective? Did everything go perfectly? No, right? We'll go talk about it. Whatever it is, you go talk about it and then find a way to solve it. And then I want to see the results in that, in the sprint review. So when next time we go to a sprint review, I don't want to hear again, we said we would do this, but we didn't get it done, right? If that happened, it has to be a unique reason. It can't be the same reason that came up the last time. If it's a unique reason, great. You found something new, as Michael was saying, right? You found something that you wouldn't have found had you not talked about it for 6 months. So you found it. Great. Fix it now. But you should also have a log of those unique mistakes, because those log of unique mistakes essentially is a log of your improvements. Those are the things that you fixed and you got better with. So that essentially now becomes your wall of glory if you think about it, because those are all the improvements you made over time. And so I, as a Scrum Master, would hold the team accountable for not overcommitting to that. And, you can ask them a flat out, blunt question. We committed 30 things last time. We got 5 things. We have 30 things again in the planning. What's our confidence level in getting this done? Like, somebody tell me that I'm crazy here, because we got 5 things done the last time. So tell me why we can do more than 5 things this time. What is fundamentally different about the nature of this work? And if everybody's kind of like, yeah, we can't do it, well, then let's not do it. Sometimes you have to play that role. Like, the Scrum Master essentially is whatever the team needs them to be. Sometimes you're the jester, you're the agony aunt, sometimes you're the politician, sometimes you're the cop, you're whatever this team needs you to be. You want to be malleable enough as a personality to be able to flip through that. That's why we say invest in facilitation skills. That's why we say invest in speaking skills, invest in just basic human intelligence skills or emotional intelligence skills, so you can recognize the pulse of the audience and know when to insert novelty, humor, contrast, emotion into the conversation. That's why you're also not their boss, you're their peer, so they can be honest with you. You can be honest with them, right? So this happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to consciously do it though. If you're consistent with it, then over time, people get used to that behavior. So it's about normalizing that behavior of not overestimating, not underestimating. Don't bloat up or inflate your estimates. Also, don't downsize your estimates unnecessarily. Call a spade a spade. And if it's going to take 5 days, it's going to take 5 days. Like, the simplest technique that I used to use, if people would get into a tiff between estimation and somebody would say this is 57 and somebody said this is 5, right? And they've talked about it, but nobody can get on the same page. My general philosophy, always go with the highest estimate. But whoever gave the highest estimate, make them do the work. So what happens is 2 good things happen there. One, that person feels that, my vote counts. So they'll be honest because their voice was heard. And so they feel like, it's a democracy now. Second, they also realize it's a democracy. So every vote does count, which means if you give the wrong estimate, everybody's going to be looking at you in the team. And so you have the vote, but you also have a responsibility, right? So now you're basically helping them realize that they're a valuable member of the team and they have the space to be able to say and give their honest opinion, but it's going to be held accountable. And so I've had multiple occasions where people have come back to me saying, hey, you know what, boss, it was not 5 days. It was kind of like 1 day. Okay, great. You learned. Let's not make the same mistake again. Move on, right? So you can teach the team how to get over their mistakes by providing that space for them. Michael, something to add?
I promise, sir, I will shut up. Okay.
No, you can call me Akash, by the way. No,
I'm not going to give your full name because I'm going to call you G, bro, because I don't want to mess up your name.
no,
Okay?
you can just call me Akash. Akash is my first name. Just call me Akash.
No, I'm speaking directly to G.
G-Man.
Don't make me say your whole name.
That's my nickname. They call me G-Man here.
Okay, G-Man. Being an American and you got more syllables than I do. Look, man, I'm going to call you G, or G-Man. The biggest thing, and this is what I do, I need to understand the role that you're standing in. Are you the product owner? Are you the Scrum Master? God forbid you're doing both. What is your position?
Just a product owner role, but this is a brand new team. The new way of Agile is new in our industry. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So being a product owner, the number one thing that I look at, who do you answer to?
My Scrum Master, he's also VP of the department.
Okay, so for the Scrum Master, how tight are you? Is this a guy you can call up at 10 o'clock Saturday night and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to make it in on Monday, or hey, I really have a problem with this. do you have that type of accessibility?
That's very
Okay.
flexible. Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, and what I look at, and this is where I start with any build, especially as a product owner, because I mean, dude, you got like one of the toughest roles. I'm sorry, I'm Southern California, and I get to use that word. Okay, here's where I'm coming from: is to be able to clearly communicate his expectations. All right, because that is a moving target. That's going to constantly change. But what I do in these situations, I always try to avoid what I call Operation Mushroom. If you hadn't guessed, I kind of had a military background at some point. That's where you're kept in the dark and you're fed excrement, and I've been in companies like that where I'm trying to move this project forward. I'm trying to get this delivered, and I can't talk to the CEO. I can't talk to the CFO. I can't talk with the CIO. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like make hand puppets? It's like I know that we have a great team, but how can we deliver if we don't know what their vision is? So you've already solved that part of the equation. Okay. So there's two more pieces that I want to give you.
Yeah.
So one is you have the communication. Fantastic. Two is rolling stories. I'm gonna create a provocative question, and I want you to really think about this. Can you break those rolling stories down into smaller pieces?
Depends, not all the time. Like my next question with Akash, this is going to be the next question, right? The reason the tasks are going sprint after sprint, because those ones have a lot of external dependencies, right? And we don't have all the team members are DevOps. They are sometimes managers or people who can pass the message to the team. I
Gee,
think
I'm
that's
sorry, man.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So that's probably the reason, Akash, that we are going sprint after sprint, that we couldn't finish it.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael, were you done? I don't want to jump in front of you.
I just want to add one thing, and that's
Yep.
if I could add a tool to what you talked about earlier.
Yep.
I want to see if we can add Miro, but I want to get your approval before I
Yes.
drop that in. Akash,
Yeah.
is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Miro, and what I want to do, G-Man, is address your point where, yeah, people get tired of the same retro. People get tired of the same sprint planning. Okay. Daily Scrum, sorry, deal with it. Okay. Because all I'm going to do as a Scrum Master is ask one question: who wants to start? And then I'm just taking notes like a madman. Okay. But in your position here, take a look at Miro and take a look at the templates, because there are so many readily available free templates to help you creatively look at a retrospect or sprint planning. Now, I don't work for them, okay? I like this tool, and it's helped me out of a lot of bad spots where people just get burned out. It's like, oh gosh, the same thing every time. Here's went right, here's went wrong. I don't know what we can improve, and you can just hear the burnout that they have, right? But that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I think that the question about the need. Oh, sorry, my dog's barking. Give me a sec. I'll be back.
G-Man, can I ask what type of industry this is? I don't want to know the company, just industry.
Yeah, it's just a finance industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, dog distraction.
That's okay.
As far as the nature of your work and it's not fitting the time boundary, I think that this is where, if it's a consistent behavior where the majority of your work is not fitting the time boundary, it probably even warrants a deeper conversation around the time boundary that you've set up. Like what is driving whatever that 1 week, 2 week, 3 week window is. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, a sprint essentially is there to help you put a wrapper of planning, execution, review, and a look back. So you can get better at that behavior over time. And so you want it to be long enough that you can deliver some valuable work, but at the same time short enough that the definition of what you're building stays static within that window, and that the degree of variability is controlled to a certain degree, right? Because if you have it too long, like a waterfall project, then variability increases quite a bit, right? So you want to keep it short enough. So it's a sweet spot you got to find. And so if you're in a situation where you're dependent on 3 different teams and you can't sequence those dependencies out because of whatever reason, then you got to rethink what your strategy is around time boundaries of planning and execution. Because then it also opens up a conversation of, is our number one problem predictability, or is our number one problem flow? Because if your number one problem is flow and you want to keep things moving, then you're probably moving more towards a flow-based approach than a plan-driven approach to a certain degree, right? And so then it opens up conversations on Kanban and things like that. But that's not the only reason to shift to a different operating model. It's one of the many reasons. But I say that you should definitely talk more as a team and perhaps even involve those dependent teams and involve management to have a broader conversation of the fact that the nature of our work is consistently falling short of the time boundaries that we have set up. And if this continues, then we will never be in a position to be able to build some predictable cadence of how we deliver work. So either we shorten or lengthen the boundary to a certain degree, or the other teams have to find ways to deliver what they have to deliver to us, or we have to embed those skills within our team so that we can broaden up our team a little bit, or we have to recarve out the architecture and the requirements in different ways. So there could be a whole bunch of different things you can talk through. Right? It just depends on what the low-hanging fruit is and what the point of highest leverage is. But you should talk through that, I'd say.
Yeah, I think we are evolving, Akash. We just started, the points you made is also excellent points, and that's where we are going towards. We are planning to bring the people who's really doing the job within the stream, right? But in the meantime, what I'm doing right now to solve this problem, the task that is long-term work, I'm putting in the backlog as a medium level priority, and the short-term works that can be done within 10 business days are in the doing column, right? But the other problem is, if you put in the backlog, it doesn't mean I'm not going to look at it. I look at it every day, ask the person, give me an ETA when it's going to be done. It's kind of, it's in the backlog, but I'm still doing work. It's only me, not the team.
Yeah. And which is, to a certain degree, it might be a thing that might go away over time. The larger point I would say think about, because I've seen this happen to teams, is avoid getting into that habit of being an infrastructure system or platform driven delivery, which means what teams start to do is they say, this is the easiest thing to do from the platform perspective or from the application perspective. Let's just work on that. That might not be the highest business value. So what should drive the sequencing of the work broadly is your business value. What's the most important thing? What's the urgent thing that will give us the most amount of value? Then you have to backtrack into just enough infrastructure or application detail you need to get that job done. Technology should not be driving your roadmap, right? Your roadmap should be driven from a customer standpoint, whatever the product is. And then you have to backtrack into just enough technology needed to support that. And then the architecture will evolve, the technology will evolve, and you will build out the technical roadway from there. Now, granted, some level of intentional design has to be done at the start. If it's a data warehousing project, you got to set up the databases to a certain degree. You got to set up the fact and dimension tables. Some things have to be set up to a certain degree, but you don't want to get into a process where your own systems and the complexity involved is driving the sequencing of the work. Because then the product owner essentially is not empowered to make any decision. They're just going to be like, what's the easiest thing that can be done? Let's just do that, right? So you don't want that to happen. You want your own infrastructure to evolve with the sequencing driven by the business, right? Now, if some things can't be done, okay, you meet them halfway, and there's a happy medium. Sometimes technology wins, sometimes business wins, but for the most part, the business always should have the opportunity to be the first voice in the room, because essentially we're building it for them, right? All of this stuff is not going to be useful if they're not going to be using it. So you could have Microsoft Word that has 10,000 features, but if you're only going to use 5 features, you don't really need all that product, right? So just think about that also.
Sounds good.
Yeah. What else? Anybody else? Any other questions?
Akash, I have a question for you.
Hi, Balbi.
I was in your class a couple of weeks ago from Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to give a complete shift from somebody who's been a Scrum Master, somebody who's been a product owner, and I've been listening to Michael and a few others over the last few weeks. Now, I am coming from a completely different background, never been a Scrum Master. This is all new to me. But somebody had told me that, this is the line that you should take. I've been in the federal public service now for 35 years. I've managed various projects and the contraband detection side with Canada Customs. So what's your advice? I mean, I have an idea what it is. I've got friends who are currently Scrum Masters, and they're kind of trying to get me into this business. So what's your advice for a non-starter, a experienced in any of this framework of Agile and so on and so forth. The government of Canada is actually starting this right now. I've seen the need, and from taking a class and talking to other people and reading more about this, I can see the benefit of this in our public service. But at the same time, I'm also retiring and trying to look for something else to do in my retirement. So what's your advice?
Yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate the context. As far as what I would recommend you do, I don't want to be audacious enough to say that because that's your choice. But I'll tell you a couple things from my experience though, about what this role entails and what are the things to be aware of. I got into this role because I came from an engineering background and I did a lot of consulting, and then I realized that this Scrum Master thing is like project management, where you don't have to manage the project, but you can actually manage the way the project is being done. So it's not so much about the activities involved, it's more about how you can help drive efficiency up by helping people see how they should be thinking about certain things. So what you really end up doing is you end up exercising a lot of your facilitation skills, you end up exercising a lot of your listening skills, and being fully present and not solving the problem, but helping people how to solve problems. So you get really good at not problem solving, but recognizing how to define problems, how to get people situated in a context where they can see the problem for what it is, and then give them certain tools that they can use to handle problem solving. So that those tools could be conversational tools, or they could be actual AV tools, like Miro is a great example of that. So you could give them almost like a framework for how they can navigate through those conversations. If that's something you like doing as a skill, which involves speaking, which involves listening, which involves leadership without authority, but rather influence. If that's something you enjoy, then maybe the role of a Scrum Master is something you will find joy in over time, because the Scrum Master's role naturally progresses towards training, towards coaching, towards enablement, towards even transformation leadership. So there are opportunities, even from a career development standpoint there, if you choose to go down that road. Some people I've noticed that they take up the Scrum Master role and they love it so much, they say, I'm just going to do that. That's great too. Some people see it as a means to an end. Some people say, I want to do this, and then they start to coach the team. They're like, you know what? My real joy is actually coaching. So then they become an agile coach. And then some people say, coaching is great, but I really like to teach. I like training. I like presentation. I like showing the concept. They go into training. And then some people are like, you know what? Coaching and training is fine, but my real joy is in building a coalition of people that can execute a larger scaled change, if you will. So they go into transformation. And then transformation goes into leading the whole agile movement, if you will, in a company, right? So depending on what your interest is, there are plenty of folks in the road ahead. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And I'm listening to you. So I've done, in my current role, I've done training, I've done facilitating, I've coached. Over 35 years, we get so many different types of technology. Now, you have to bring this technology to a border services officer who has no understanding of science, but now you have to show them and coach them on how to use it effectively in our environment. So, I'm very comfortable in those roles, but I'm just a little nervous not being an IT guy, because every time I'm listening to you and your participants, they all come from like highly technical type of work, and that kind of not scares me, but I don't want to be thrown into a situation, and then I'm going, okay, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. The unknown is always there. So my follow-up would be like, okay, how do I start in this business? Like, should I sit down with somebody who is currently a Scrum Master and see how they facilitate these meetings and how this is actually done? And what's the starting point? Where do you think I should start? I'm sorry if I'm boring anybody else, but I don't want to hijack the agenda here. I'm just trying to see if I should even think about this role and move into that direction.
No, I appreciate you sharing that and being honest and vulnerable about that. It's also it takes a lot to be able to be that courageous. So I appreciate that. And there's no agenda as such, it's kind of open space. So, whatever people bring up, we talk. So I'm happy to talk about this as much as you want. Here's what I will say. As far as getting into this business, obviously shadowing helps. Shadowing will be part of your usual ramp up time when you join a company. And there are a lot of companies that hire not just for experience, but that hire for potential and for capability. And so there are plenty of companies out there that will not care about what they do in the line of business, but what they will care about is the job that you're trying to do for them. Do you have experience in that job? So if you are applying for a Scrum Master's job, you may not have been a Scrum Master, but do you understand the importance of coaching? Can you handle a crucial conversation? If I give you a emotionally charged conversation, can you teach people how to detach themselves emotionally from it, de-escalate, focus on the what and the why, and then negotiate the how from there? Do you understand the basic dynamics of that conversation involved? Can you facilitate your way through that? If I give you 5 minutes to present in an all hands or a town hall discussion, and you have 5 minutes to dazzle 5,000 people, can you decide what the economy of words is going to be that can create the maximum impact in the minimum amount of time? Can you clearly articulate that message? Which in most lines of work, it transfers over as a skill. So there are a lot of transferable skills you can pick up, which in your whatever 35 plus years of experience you would have picked up, they can transfer over to technology also. Picking up technology is not that difficult. You give it enough time and enough patience, anybody who has a non-technical background can pick up a technical language. I mean, being an engineer, I've switched over programming language multiple times, going from object-oriented design to mainframe. It's the same way of thinking. It's ones and zeros and it's logic. You don't need to be an expert at it. You need to understand critical thinking. You need to understand systems thinking. If you understand those larger abstract concepts and how interrelationships play in, then it's just a question of understanding human nature at scale and who owns which part of the puzzle. If there's a bottleneck, you go to them and say, hey, boss, this is not working. Do you own this? Okay, can you go talk to this person? So a lot of the times you're just kind of connecting the dots. So I wouldn't let technology and lack of experience in that dampen your enthusiasm for that. That's number one. Second, networking is always great. So obviously networking just on the internet is good from LinkedIn and stuff. But also I would say Scrum Alliance and Agile Alliance are two big organizations. They have conferences, they have user groups, right? They have local user groups like regional user groups, as well as larger user groups that happen right now. Most of them happen virtually. Some happen in person as well. So attending those places will certainly get you hooked up with other people who are in the similar line of work. Some people who are experienced, some people who are not, some people who are sometimes headhunters show up. They're looking for candidates who are looking to apply. So you could network and build a strong set of connections in just those forums. There are so many conferences out there, regardless of which part of the world you're in. And a lot of them are virtually available. And most of them, if you submit some sort of an abstract to talk, they let you in for free because there's no charge because you're a speaker there. And then once you're a speaker there, you get backstage access to a lot of other speakers and other trainers. Sometimes you can volunteer at these places and then you get in for free, or you get in for a discounted price, or you can review abstracts for them and serve in some sort of an editorial authority. So there are plenty of ways of how you can get involved in the community. Once you get your foot in the community and you know one person, they'll say, hey, meet this person, meet that person, go talk to this person, go talk to that person. And that's how you kind of build connections. It's like anything else in life, right? The more you go out there, the more you put yourself out there, the more people recognize you, and everybody's trying to do a good job there. So it's not like people are trying to step over each other. It's a big enough space that people realize that there's enough cake for everybody to eat, essentially, if you're into cakes or whatever else.
It's very interesting you bring this thing up because 90% of people that I work with, because I work in a lab environment, they're either engineers or chemists. The only problem these guys who are having how I fit in there really nicely is my people skills. Because I talk to people, I make people laugh, and I try to make something which is very scientific into a very easy to understand to a layman. How this is going to work from science to actually the guy who's using at the end, the end user as to, I just want to know if there's drugs there or no drugs. That's all. I don't care what the science is behind. So that's a skill that I can bring, and that's what I want to do. And my people that I've known, I've networked with over the last 30 years, they say you can bring this thing into any type of business. So I'm hoping that I can do the same thing in this business.
100%. That's a skill, and you can attach that skill to multiple languages. You can attach that skill to multiple contexts. That skill transfers over. And if you're good at that, that's sort of the baseline of leadership. Like a lot of leaders struggle with that very thing, people management skills, people leadership skills, recognizing how to be able to de-escalate. Just to be able to de-escalate and get people to ground themselves on what the thing is. Why is it important to do it a certain way? How can we go about doing it? To be able to detach themselves from that emotional thing That itself is the essence of leadership. So if you already have that and you have experience with it, then I would say, you already have a leg up compared to so many other people out there.
Got it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your
Yeah, good question. Michael,
excellent.
Michael, you've been waiting a while. Something to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm making a lot of noise. I really don't mean to. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Baldur, first of all, I don't want to piss you off. I want to visit the beautiful country of Canada again. All right. But here's what I want you to understand.
Anytime.
Okay. There's only two things you need to be a Scrum Master. Okay. Now, when I went into technology 23 years ago, on the operations side of things, I couldn't even spell IT. Okay. Here's what I want you to understand. As a Scrum Master, you need two things. You need both your ears so you can listen, and that's number one. Okay. And the second thing you need is a mirror so you can reflect what's being said to you back at that person so they can see it themselves. If you can get those two things done, you're going to be the best Scrum Master that team has ever seen. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I appreciate your input.
For your future, that's something we can talk about offline. I can shoot you my email or whatever, but I don't want to muddy up the waters here, okay? But I do believe you got massive opportunity.
Yeah, in fact, that's a great call out. Sorry to interrupt you again. Anybody who wants to network, please put your information in the chat, exchange information. That's the whole point of all of this. Get connected. It's always a good idea. Also, Balbir, think about this. I joke about this with my colleagues and even with my wife at home is, how many of us actually do the thing like professionally that we went to school for do? You know what I did in my school? I did like digital signal processing and hardware and VLSI design. I did none of that at work. I talk for a living, right? And so human beings are incredibly resilient. I mean, you've seen this, you've been in the industry. So we are extremely resilient. We are extremely malleable. If you have an open mind, it's a superpower today. Because having an open mind and having that can-do attitude, you can do a lot. I've transitioned multiple careers. In my classes, when I teach Scrum, I've had clinical psychiatrists, I've had automobile mechanics, I've had elementary school teachers who have all gone on to be successful Scrum Masters in tech industries. So people move all the time. It's kind of like just a change in state. When you're jumping into ice cold water, before jumping in, when you jump in, it's going to be fine. But it's that jump that we have. So it's the state transition, essentially. That's the freakiest part. But once you get in there, it's going to be fine. It's like everybody else. You feel like my boss used to say back in the day when I was doing consulting that you generally get promoted to the next level of incompetence. So everybody's learning at their level, right? Everybody's making mistakes. I wouldn't worry about it. I would just network, jump in, and then once you get in there, you find a way to swim.
I mean, by profession, I'm an economist, and I'm working in a lab with 90% of the people. So
you already have. Yeah. So you're living it. You just have to extend that same thing. What I generally say to anybody who comes to my classes is think about 3 or 4 skills that transfer over. Like speaking is a skill that transfers over. Organizing is a skill that transfers over. Writing is a skill that transfers over. If you can think about these 3 or 4 skills that transfer over and really invest in that, then it becomes a thing that you can use across different lines of businesses, across different tech lines. So think about skills that are generalizable enough that transfer over, and then invest academically in that, whether it's certifications or going to a class or whatever, or reading a book, whatever the thing is, right? Considering your constraints, invest in that. The more you invest in that stuff, the better and well-rounded you will get over time in any career. At least in my 18-year experience, that's what I have found. Like, there are people here who have had more experience than me, so I'm sure they have a different perspective. So I'd love to hear that also, if anybody has a different perspective. Yeah, sorry, Gautam, go ahead.
This will be my last question. Sorry. I know like Agile is a nice way of working and project management is kind of related to the waterfall method. So this is my question. Now, I mean, progressing very good here. Now, because of I'm pretty much similar to your background, Akash, came from engineering background, manufacturing, and currently working in finance industry. So now what's happening? Things are going very nice. So I'm being pulled in different department to do the actual work. Right. So now I'm thinking like, maybe next few years, I'm going to be part of maybe become a project manager. If that happens, my question is, am I able to still run this Agile, like what I'm doing right now, plus taking care of my separate department, a totally different world? Like, what do you think the correlation would cause any effect? Or this is okay?
It's a good question, Gautam. Think about it like this. Even if the job has a natural level of synergy, it's two jobs. So now you ask yourself, how consistently will you be able to do awesome in both jobs, right? Unless both jobs are natural replicas of each other, where you do in one thing and then you come back and replicate the same thing in the other, and it's just muscle memory. Unless that is happening, it's always going to require a certain level of cognitive load. And so that cognitive load over time will get too much. And now throw in the idea of some of these things being at odds with each other, like a Scrum Master's job and a project manager's job. There's a bit of a conflict of interest sometimes. And so now you have that dichotomy to wrestle with also in one cognitive load. Over time, that won't be sustainable. If you think about the basic difference between a project manager and a Scrum Master, is in Scrum, there is no role of a project manager. Reason why is because project management has been divvied across the Scrum roles. So when you ask about project management, you want to think about which aspect of project management are you talking about? Are you talking about managing the budget, the return on investment, the prioritization, the talking to stakeholders? We have a product person for that. That's a product owner. You're talking about removing impediments, coaching the team, holding up the accountability, making sure that the process is running smoothly, helping the team evolve the definition of ready and definition of done. That's the Scrum Master's job, right? Big part of that is radiating information, metrics, and that sort of stuff, so you can monitor performance and growth. Are you talking about technical stuff, design, solution, estimation, modeling, architecture, all that? That's the developers. So depending on which aspect of project management you look at, one of the roles in Scrum should have it covered, which is why Scrum is a team-based approach. So if you have project managers, best case scenario, they become active stakeholders to the team, where they interface with the product owner and they give them requirements from the perspective of governance, regulation, compliance, audit, and the product owner prioritizes that among everything else. Worst case scenario, they don't exist, right? So now there's a spectrum along which they can exist. Now the organization can decide how they choose to make that role set up there.
Okay,
right?
Sounds good. That's what I expected.
As far as the question in the chat, just give me 1 minute, Michael, I'll let you get back in there. There's somebody, I think Chidvi asked that the roles have been around for a while. Is it way harder to jump in now? And how do you stand amongst other candidates? So here's the easiest way to think about this. So Scrum was invented in 1995 by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwab, right? Two people, they came up with Scrum, right? Then the Scrum Alliance was founded in the early 2000s. And that's when the CSM certification was born, the Certified Scrum Master certification. And so it's been over 20 years now that certification has existed. If you look at the certification and you go to scrumalliance.org, they have a whole certification tree. And you can progress your capability of being a Scrum Master if you go down that certification road. The first point, the entry point of that certification is the Certified Scrum Master, which is still one of the most, if not the most popular certification in the market space. So even after 20 plus years of something existing, if the base version of that knowledge is still the most popular version, what does that tell you? I mean, people are still struggling with the basics, or people are still learning the basics. So it is still hot in the market because people are still getting into that industry from a basic level. So the most of the people that you're competing with are people just like you, new to this stuff. And there, the strategy of differentiation is not going to be about Scrum knowledge. The strategy of differentiation is going to be about the transferable skills, speaking, writing, articulating, organizing, facilitating, right? And so those skills, if you start to invest in, then you can separate yourself out from everybody else, whether they've been doing it for 20 years or they've been doing it for 5 years, right? Sorry, Michael, go ahead. You had your hand up earlier.
It comes down to one single thing, and I really just want to echo exactly what you said. It comes down to the ability to communicate. If you're a person, I'll give you the stupid joke. If you've heard this before, I apologize. The difference between an introvert engineer and an extrovert engineer. An introvert engineer stares at his own shoes when he's talking with you. The extrovert stares at yours. Okay? That is the world that we come from. And it's not only technology, but I mean, it goes into economics in the labs and the other people that I've heard. If you're able to communicate and connect, this is the right thing. And the other thing, looking through the chats, am I doing this right? Yeah, Akash, take it back to what you said. Look, this field is barely off the ground. Okay, we are at the pioneer level of this. So if any other jerk says to you, "Oh, you're doing this wrong," I'll tell you what, they shouldn't be in this field. Okay, because this is going to be constantly changing. This is a dynamic element. But if you can connect and communicate, that's exactly, if you stand at that foundation, that's what you need to do. Akash, please correct me if you see something
No,
different.
I completely agree. And as far as Chidvi asking, how I wish I could communicate these words, it's not magic. It's just practice. I've been doing this stuff for 18 years, right? So if you've been doing for 1 year, you can't compare yourself to somebody who's doing for 18 years. That's just practice, right? That's not fair to you. That's not fair to me also. So you want to compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. They've been doing the same thing. They've been living and breathing that thing, right? You're probably good at something that I'm terrible at because I've not been doing that and you've been doing it. So at the end of the day, it is practice. You want to get better at something, you do it 1,000 times. Repetition. And every time you do it, be conscious about what you're doing wrong and make it better. As long as you do that over time, everybody learns this stuff. It's not rocket science. These are skills everybody can naturally pick up. You just have to have an open mind. You just have to slow it down. Be conscious about it. Think about what academic learning exists in the industry. Be conscious about what trajectory you're building and keep going after it. And set monthly milestones. Every month, I want to get better at speaking. So I got to go present at a user group or go present at a conference. Every month, I have to write something. Even if you don't publish it, write it, get it evaluated by somebody else, like a peer or a friend or even your spouse. And then every month, I'm going to do some kind of a certification if you're trying to build up a repertoire of certification. So you can set up a career plan. Years ago, when I was coming up to be a certified Scrum trainer, I used to have on my bedroom wall a Kanban where I had all the things that I wanted to do over the 2.5-year journey. My wife thought it was crazy. But hey, I said, you know what? Every day I wake up, I want to see it. And I got it done in 2.5 years. It is not a big deal. It is just discipline. You just have the discipline. Every day you put in the work. Over time, you'll get the result. But it's consistent and it is monotonous and it is boring and it'll not be fancy, but the result will be fancy. When you get the result at the finish line, everybody's there celebrating with you. But when you're doing it, nobody's there. You just have to do it and have faith in the process. It's the same thing with being a Scrum Master also and doing Scrum. You have to have faith in the process. Everything is a process. Keep doing it consistently over time. Track the metrics. Over time, you will see the benefit of it. Don't react to point-in-time data. Look for patterns of information and respond. Respond to the pattern of information, but don't react because reaction is going to be temporary. Response is going to be something you will look at based on the pattern. All right, we are over time, so I want to be sensitive to everybody because I don't know where people are joining in from different parts of the world. If you would like to reach out after the session, reach out. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Akash Srinivasan, or you can reach out to your point of contact at Simpliaxis and just ask them for my contact information. I'm sure they can send it to you. There will be recordings of this cut up and put up on YouTube for like smaller segments. If people ask questions, they will sort of just chunk it up with a question and answer. And so you can look for that as well. I will try and do this more regularly. It kind of dropped off my calendar because I got busy. But I'll try and do this once a month. If you liked what you heard and you'd like to come again, remember it's free. There's no like hidden publicity marketing here going on. I'm just doing this for learning. So I used to be a full-time trainer. Now I'm not. I work at a company called Salesforce. And at Salesforce, I work as a senior director. And in my free time, I kind of do this stuff. And so I will continue doing this once a month. If you have questions, join, ask questions. If you have a lot of questions and you feel hesitant to ask these questions, before you join the session, email the questions out to Simpliaxis. They will send it to me, and then I'll just kind of rattle off the answers without calling out who asked the question, so you can feel safe to ask the question. All right. Other than that, good luck, everybody. Thank you, Michael and Gautam, for contributing, and Balbir as well. Everybody else, I didn't get a chance to see or hear you. Hopefully next time. Good luck. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Akash. Bye.
Thank you.